Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whoever's joined us from around the world. We're on chapter 4, the laws of washing your hands in the Shulchan Aruch. Yirchatz Yadav, first we wash our hands and we make a blessing on the Til Sidayim. The truth is, we don't really make the blessing right away anymore. We wait until we're ready to go to synagogue and pray, but there's not a whole lot of time between the time we wake up and get ready to go pray. And if there is, there'll be a little bit of a discussion whether or not you should say it now, after you wash your hands, or later when you're on your way to shul, because perhaps we're going to discuss the different ideas, the reasons why we wash our hands, and the reason why we make the blessing, and that would make a practical difference in when we will make the blessing. Okay, so it said to wash your hands, then make this blessing, and then we say a special blessing after having gone to the bathroom. Sounds like really kind of funny, right? Seriously. We are so grateful, and let me just add that we do go to the bathroom on a regular basis more than once a day, if we're lucky. And that means a number one and a number two. And we're just so grateful that the body parts work, that from the lungs and the holes and right, we all have orifices and sometimes they're supposed to be closed. And they are actually closed. And sometimes they're supposed to be open, and Baruch Hashem, thank God that they're open, as opposed to the other way around, where they're supposed to be open and they get closed, or vice versa. And also the organs that we have that are full, like lungs, that are full of, let's say, spaces, and perhaps the heart, where it has a space for the blood to flow through. And when we think about this, seriously, we should be thinking about it, not just when we make the blessing, and not just when we go to the bathroom, but when we breathe, and when we're able to walk, and we're able to talk, and we're able to function. Okay, so it's to have it constantly on our minds, a attitude of gratitude. Okay, Micha, you got it? Okay, so if you're familiar with the blessings, that's the Asher Yotzar. And in the Mishnah Berurah, he also mentions the Elokai Neshama blessing, which is the blessing about having the fact that God returned to us a pure soul. Our soul is pure, and it was returned to us, and we are extremely grateful. These are the three major blessings that we say in order, the first several, and that's why it's all in a unit here and mentioned that way. We'll get to the other blessings later. Right now, we're just focusing on the one idea of washing our hands. And interestingly enough, the Mishnah Berurah says there are two reasons. I personally have broken down four reasons, and we'll see what they are. So the Rosh writes, after the Mishnah Berurah brings down, there's two reasons. So according to the Rosh, I'm just going to read it in English, even though I'm going to have the Hebrew here, because what happens when a man sleeps? A person sleeps, his hands are very busy. Now, unless you're in a straitjacket or you have a hermetically sealed pajama, you're likely to scratch your armpit or any place that's normally covered, okay? And it would be impossible for a man to not touch any of these places while he's asleep because he's not conscious of where his hands are. So the rabbis instituted a blessing on our washing our hands in order that we should be able to pray, say the Shema, right? Shema Yisrael, unification of God, and our silent prayer, which is the two most important prayers of the day. Now, so the one thing we learn is when your hands are dirty, you're not allowed to make blessings. You can't use Hashem's name. You can't say it, you can't pronounce it, you can't say it. Okay, we don't learn Torah also when our hands are dirty. So why did I say any place that's normally covered? Because, and I'm talking about for men, okay, and basically women as well, we're talking about, from the neck collar, the neck bone. For men, we're a little bit more lenient, but for women, it's the elbow. At least in America, many men wear shorter sleeves, so it's normally covered. And obviously where the pants are covering. Because the sweat that usually would evaporate stays close to the skin if you have clothes on. The clothes don't allow the sweat to evaporate, and we call, I know women don't sweat, They perspire. No, so the sweat is considered dirty. So at least women know that, but guys don't know it. So we're telling you guys, okay? So if you touch places where the sweat is not allowed to evaporate, then your hands are dirty and you cannot pray. So like in the middle of the day, if you scratch yourself inside your shirt before you pray or make blessings or learn Torah, one would have to wash their hands again. Okay, so that's the first opinion. The Rashba says that in the morning, after one has slept, we become ke bria chadasha. I love this word. It's as if we are born again. We are a brand new creature, never have been on the planet before. This is our first and only opportunity. Right now, we're living in the now. We didn't have yesterday. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, but we were just created. So as a new creation, we wash our hands. Now, he doesn't really explain more than that, other than the verse we saw before, Chadashim lebakrim rabba amunatecha, how grateful we are that Hashem has given us another chance. So as if he created us anew, and based on that, we need to praise Hashem. We need to thank God for what? Ready for these words? Why did God create us? To honor him and to serve him and to bless his name. That's the reason we are created. And because of this, that's why the rabbis established that in the morning we make these blessings every morning. Those blessings we say every morning. Now I read this as ulachach gam davar zeh tiknu b'shachar, as if it's a third reason. It could be overlapping the second reason, but I honestly see it as a brand new reason, and that is to sanctify lihitkadesh b'kedushato, to sanctify in holiness. Therefore we wash our hands from a vessel, just like the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who goes in to the
any priest.
Okay, say it. Any of the Kohanim that go into the temple to do what? To serve the Lord. They wash from a special kior, a special
Layer.
I know, but it's a large vessel that's full with water, and truth be told, it's probably very tricky. They have to have their hands and their feet extended, and they're washed at the same time through this lever, some type of it has many faucets around it. It's filled with holy water that came out of the mikveh in the morning. This vessel was lowered down into the mikveh and brought up, and that holy water is then I don't know what the word is. It's not sprinkled. It's poured. But you basically it's the spigot. They open the spigot and their hands and feet. And you'll see later on there's an opinion that holds we also have to wash our hands and feet in the morning. Okay? And that's pretty easy to do when you go take a shower. Okay. I mean for the feet anyway. Okay, where are we? So I see that it could be that one was being thankful, and this is towards service. So I see them as two different things. One may say that's how we show our thanks, by acting as a servant. But I believe that it's another idea to have on your mind when you wake up in the morning. Number one, cleanliness. Number two, thankfulness. And number three, servitude. Okay? And we're going to see a fourth reason. So I don't know why he brings down just two reasons. He says there's two reasons. And the fourth reason, which we will discuss, is called Ruach Ra. Okay, so maybe that's because it's more spiritual and maybe esoteric and maybe not brought down in the post scheme in the same way as these are. Okay. Now, let's say, for example, he claims that we're going to be strict and hold by both opinions. So again, he is still holding it's two totally different things. One is cleanliness, and the other one maybe one opinion, one concept with two subcategories: to be thankful and to serve. So we're going to have in mind both. Now, if one, for some reason one didn't bless on the washing in the morning, let's say they washed, but they didn't make the blessing, later on they realized they already went to synagogue and they prayed, and they realized they never made the bracha, the blessing beforehand. It's too late. You lost out on an opportunity to praise Hashem with God's holy name that we would be uplifted by mentioning. Okay. Because why? Because it would be a blessing in vain. You're mentioning God's name. A very important rule is that the blessings, in 98% of the times, it's the general rule, right? Every rule has exceptions. The general rule is that we always make the blessing before the action. Immediately before an action, like I'm going to put a mezuzah on my door, so I get it ready, I kind of make the holes and everything's ready. I got the hammer in my hand and the nail and everything's ready to go. Then I make the blessing. Before that, it's too much in advance, and afterwards, it's too late. So there's a whole idea of making that blessing immediately. Hopefully we'll get into more detail when we talk about blessings in general. Okay, so he mentions the word, and we should bless when? Now he says immediately after we wash our hands, and you don't need to wait until you dry your hands. And this whole idea now gets into the Ruach Ra. Okay, because if we're trying to remove this Ruach Ra, Resh Ayin, called evil spirit upon us, so it could be that just because you washed with water, that still the water is still holding on to some of this contamination, and until you get rid of it entirely, you can't bless. Okay, that's going to be a whole discussion. We believe the basic premise here is that even if your hands are wet, it's okay, because it's gone. We wash 3 times. Could be if you only wash twice, it wouldn't be enough. But the 3rd time should have washed all that water away. I just want to reiterate what we talk about Ruach Ra. In Judaism, we do speak about holiness, and that God is all good, and all goodness comes from God, and at the same time, no evil can actually come from God. Yet, at the same time, it says that God created evil, so how can that be? So what we understand is like this, that God allows evil into the world when he removes himself, as if to say, right? As if. So our holy soul is really very godly, and we have 5 levels of our soul. And when we sleep, the highest level of our soul disconnects and goes up to God. Therefore, there's a vacuum that's caused. Anytime there's a vacuum of holiness, what could possibly enter? The opposite of holiness. And therefore, that while we're asleep, we experience what we call 1/60th of death, which really means when we say 1/60th, it's a term meaning it's negligible. It's almost, you can't even feel it. But we know that you're sleeping, your body is resting. Obviously, they say it's not really resting, it's recharging. But there's a certain rest going on, and even your soul is recharging. And that's why that highest level of your soul is actually connecting into the highest levels of godliness, whatever that sphere may be, leaving this world. And my Rosh Hashiva, I mentioned to you guys before, the best thing before you go to sleep is have a great question in Torah, in philosophy, in what life is about. And by the next morning, it doesn't mean you'll be conscious of it. You may be, if you're lucky. But at least you would have, on a subconscious level, some answers. You ever heard that? Oh, wow. Yeah, it's Rav Noach Weinberg. There's 5 levels of your soul. Nice. Okay. Where are we at? So he says that if it's still wet, it could be that the Ruach Ra, this is the first time the Ruach Ra is being mentioned, because we want to get rid of the Ruach Ra from our hands. Okay. Now, why your fingertips? Because what happens is when your higher level of soul goes in, okay, we don't know where that is, but let's assume, rightfully so, that it's the essence of who you are. And therefore, the extremities, it's going to leave through the extremities. And the most extreme place will be your fingertips. So since it's leaving through your fingertips, there may be a little bit of residue left. And we want to get rid of that residue. Micha, you with us?
Yes, sir. Sorry, my microphone.
No, it's okay. Leave it off, but if you have any questions, please turn it back on and shout out.
You got it, sir.
Okay, he does discuss a little bit, and I don't want to go too much into it, about taking the clothes from your servant, if you have a butler, right? We all have butlers. who may not have washed their hands or may not be Jewish, who have touched your clothes and handing your clothes to you, it may be damaging. We're not going to even go into that at the moment. Then he does mention that one should wash their face, right? The face is, whether it's the window of God, I mean, it's the thing that other people see the most, and you should have a pleasant countenance. So we wash our hands in the morning, we should wash our face in the morning, and he mentions here we should wash our feet as well. Now he mentions, and why do we do it? He says, Mishum Kvod Kono, for the honor of our Creator. That's why we're washing ourselves. I mean, yes, I'm sure it's more comfortable, it's convenient, you feel good, you know what I mean? You know what I mean when you go camping, you don't shower for a day or two, it's like a little bit icky. But we are here on this planet to give honor to God. Therefore, we should wash our face, which is really very unique of who we are, and we're showing who our soul is through our face. Obviously through our actions and our speech, but our face also reflects God in a certain sense. Now, there are places, he's writing in Europe, northeastern Europe, central Europe, where people would not go barefoot. But imagine if you lived in the Middle East, like in Israel, or maybe, I don't know, California, right? People walk barefoot in California? I don't know. But anyway, so let's say the Middle East, in Israel, so I guess maybe he means sandals, but he says barefoot. What's yachefim?
Barefoot.
Barefoot.
Africa. Think about Africa.
Okay. So then he says, for those people, they don't have to wash their feet. I don't understand. No, I'm sorry. Our countries who don't go bare feet, don't walk barefoot, there's no strictness in washing your feet. But those who do walk barefoot, I guess it's a little bit more strict in terms of washing their feet. And then we say Asher Yotzar, as I mentioned, because in the morning he mentioned the same thing. We're a Bria Chadashah. We're like a brand new being, and therefore he stresses, because you're a Bria Chadashah, you need to thank Hashem. And then he mentions the Elokai Neshama, that we're so grateful and thankful to Hashem that he gave us our pure souls. Our souls are pure. You get that? Our souls are pure when we were created, and our souls are pure every morning when we wake up. Unfortunately, it's us, through our actions and our thoughts, that dirty them. But God gives us a clean slate. Okay, so the idea of saying, as I mentioned, this blessing on after going to the bathroom, he mentions two ideas. One is the Yetziras Haguf. We're so grateful that he created the body the way he did. But Yesh O Tamim Acherim, he does mention there are going to be other reasons. See in the Achronim. Fine, so we're not going to go there right now. But he mentions this whole idea of Bria Chadashah. So what happens if you slept, if you were awake the entire night? You didn't sleep. What are you going to do? So you're not able to bless, he says, Asher Yot. Okay, one second. Let me just read this. The Vitam de Bria Chadashah, Im Haya Noar Kol Halayla, the Azlo Nase Bria Chadashah B'Boker. If you were awake the whole night, you're not considered a brand new creature in the morning. Okay, so what we just learned really was that even if you didn't go to the bathroom in the morning, you still make the blessing Asher Yotzar. Because the only way you could say Asher Yotzar, because it's also going on Bria Chadashah, is if you went to the bathroom. Now, there's a whole idea about getting up in the middle of the night and having to go to the bathroom. I'll tell you, if you're conscious, you're aware, right? You're not just sleepwalking, so you actually should say the Asher Yotzar after you leave the bathroom and wash your hands. But if you're half asleep, I don't really see any reason to say the Bracha Asher Yotzar in your sleep. So I think that people should obviously know themselves. Let's see. I want to get to. So he says, someone who's Yer Shemayim. What is a Yer Shemayim? Someone who has the proper and healthy fear of God should be strict on themselves and he should wash his hands, and then when he gets dressed or puts his belt on his right, and the proper thing is to separate. Now, women have a natural separation. Okay, we're not going to get too graphic here, but a man should put on a belt. There should be a separation between his heart and what we call his nakedness, the member down below. And a woman has a natural separation. So she doesn't need a belt. She doesn't need any type of a separation, artificial separation between her heart and her erva before we make any blessings. So as an example, if the person didn't have any underwear on but had a long shirt, so that would not be appropriate for him to make blessings. He would have to have either underwear which has elastic or some kind of belt that would separate. I don't know if you noticed, there'll be many men in synagogues that when they come to pray, even though they may be wearing elastic underwear, even though they may be wearing a regular belt on their pants, they add an additional belt because, not because, I love this, in Prophet Amos. So it says, prepare to meet your maker. But for some reason, with everything we grew up in the West, you might not think of Amos. But Clint Eastwood, when he takes the 45 and puts it up to someone's face and says, prepare to meet your maker. But Amos, he's the one who invented it, right? So when we are about to pray, what's the idea? Let's say you have a regular belt. Tighten it one notch because you're girding yourself. You're getting ready for something. You know what I mean? Like the concept of pulling up your bootstraps, getting ready. So even though the law says you have to have a natural separation, we go out of our way, many of us go out of our way to add that extra boost power to prepare ourselves. Oh, come on, you've heard all this before. You just like the way I tell it. Okay. Okay, so for example, let's say in the old days, they used to have what you would call a pan by the bed. I forget what it's called. A bed pan. Let's say, for example, so if, he says like this, however, Yira be'et habracha, at the time you make the bracha, laharchich maha'abit shel mei reglayim arba amos. If you have some kind of a bedpan, you know what a bedpan is, okay? A little bucket in your room where you don't want to go to the outhouse, or you have a problem with the plumbing, so you have this little thing. So make sure to stay a distance of 6 to 8 feet away from it. Now, if what actually is okay, let's say it's not a regular bedpan, but it's just a bucket. So then if you add a certain amount of water, then knows you're diluting the urine, then it should be okay to make a blessing nearby. In other words, we don't want to make blessings where things have feces and the smell of the feces. And this comes in problematic with children. Not that the children are problematic, God forbid. Children are lovely. But sometimes they leave little packages around. So before we pray, and especially if you're bringing your children to synagogue, then we have to check to make sure that the child is clean, and that the diaper is empty, or we have to bring him out of the room and change it. It's an abomination. Hashem calls it an abomination to make blessings in such an environment where you have these feces. So what I'm going to do right now, I know this is going on for a long time, and we're going to continue. We're going to stop right now on this part, and we're going to move over to the Parsha. Okay? Guys, you can turn your microphones on. I just want to know if you have any questions at this point.